point to understand is that the war in Ukraine is a proxy war between the United States and Russia to a very large extent. It's a competition that has now turned deadly between two superpowers over who will control this place that is in between Russia and the European Union. And it didn't have to turn so ugly. In my opinion, it was provoked in no small part by the American insistence that not only the European Union should expand, but that NATO should expand. This is something that I've opposed for a very long time. Why is the U.S. pushing a military alliance up to the border of Russia when Russia has said for 30 years, don't do that? This is our national security. We don't want your military alliance on our border. And yet the United States persisted. In 2008, George W. Bush Jr. insisted that NATO commit to enlarge to Ukraine and even to the nation of Georgia, which is on the other side of the Black Sea, way to the east. And Russia said, you're surrounding us. This is our national security. You're encircling us in the Black Sea where our naval fleet is. Don't do this. Then in 2013 and 2014, the United States contributed to the overthrow of a pro-Russian president in Ukraine. That was another step on the way to this war. And so we've been escalating on both sides. Let's be clear. For 3 decades, actually, the United States has been provoking. Russia has been reacting. And now we are really in a hot war of mass destruction in Ukraine, which is a tragedy for Ukraine. It's a country caught in the middle, actually. And these kinds of battles of will between superpowers can escalate. And we hear talk every day, well, will there be nuclear attacks? Will nuclear weapons be used? It's unbelievable to have that kind of daily chit-chat, if I can, about something that is existential for the planet. I spent a lot of my life thinking about and studying the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I wrote a book to move the world, JFK's Quest for Peace, about the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The lesson of the Cuban Missile Crisis is that we came within a hair's breadth of nuclear destruction. And even the leaders weren't really in control of events completely. And it ended only by diplomacy. It didn't end by the United States winning and the Soviet Union losing. It ended by the U.S. withdrawing its nuclear weapons from Turkey, while the Soviet Union withdrew its nuclear weapons from Cuba. So there are lots of lessons from that we need to take on board 60 years later in our current conflict. But strangely enough, I understand the U.S., it's all gung-ho war, we're going to defeat Putin. That's the American way. It's naive, typically a massive failure, whether in Vietnam or Iraq or Syria or Libya or many other places. But why is Europe signing on to this the same way? That to me has been a bit of a mystery. Where are people in Europe, especially leaders in Europe, saying, look, we need to negotiate the end of this war. The war needs to stop. NATO does not need to enlarge. We need other ways for Ukraine to have its security, but we don't need a proxy war between two superpowers. That's what I'd like to hear from European leaders.
What are the economics that are driving this situation?
I don't think economics really are the major driver. I think U.S. ideology is the major driver. The U.S. ideology is one of empire. It's been that way since really the founding of the United States, even before 1787 when our Constitution was adopted, or 1776 when we had the so-called War of Independence. From the first settlements, the idea was that the white settlers on the eastern seaboard of North America would expand westward. There happened to be lots of nations westward. They were indigenous American nations. that did not perturb the white settlers, and it didn't perturb the United States of America, which in the 19th century systematically routed and in some cases committed genocide against Native American populations. When that so-called manifest destiny of continental conquest was over, almost to the moment that that was completed, the U.S. looked for adventures overseas, and it launched the war against Spain in 1898, a deliberate war in order to take new colonial possessions, which included Puerto Rico, Cuba temporarily, and the Philippines for several decades. And that began America's overseas adventures. Now, it's a complicated story. I don't want to oversimplify it, but since World War II, the American state elite has had the view that America is the superpower that should run the world. Of course, there was a Cold War confrontation with the Soviet Union between 1945 and 1991. When the Soviet Union ended, the U.S. said, "We won. Now we're the unipolar power. Now we get to do what we want." And they launched several more wars in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and so forth. These were basically premeditated wars. It was described by the Project for a New American Century as eliminating those residual regimes like Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad, who were allies of the Soviet Union or allies of Russia. Well, these have been debacles. They've cost the U.S. trillions of dollars. None of them has solved any political problems. And so when you ask, what are the economic drivers? There aren't. It's just this fundamentally that America is only safe if America dominates. That's an imperial vision. When you're an empire or quasi-empire like the U.S. is, which has military bases in more than 80 countries, every country next door to where you are is a risk to where you're already located. So there's this natural tendency to say, oh my God, well, we're this far, but we need to be that far. In other words, NATO extends to Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, but it needs to extend to Ukraine and to Georgia too. It needs to keep moving. And I recently was at a conference where a NATO official, looking a little bit like a Star Wars official from the Dark Forces, said, we will succeed in our efforts in Ukraine and onward to Eurasia, or something like that. And it was, what? This was actually at an economics and ecology conference, and I wondered why a NATO official was even speaking at such a conference. So I'm a critic of U.S. foreign policy. I don't think it serves American interests. I don't think it actually, in this case, even serves the corporate interests, although maybe some people would say in some ways it does. You could say, well, how about General Dynamics and Raytheon and the rest of the military-industrial complex? But I don't think that that's actually the main motive of this. The main motive is an ideology of statecraft, that the United States should be all over the world, basically running the show as the world's sole superpower.